What a morning it's been already. We had our outdoor service, which just snuck in just under the rain. We were out of power for a little bit, but looks like all the pieces have come back together. So we're glad you've joined us today. Today's text, as I was thinking of being on vacation for 2 Sundays, this is not the text I wanted to come back to, where Jesus is being not very nice. It's not a text that we like to read. There's a lot of power in this text, though. I want to start by talking about the Canaanite woman in this text. She's kind of the hero in the text. In many ways, when we think of the way in which she engages Jesus, there's a lot under this that resonates with our own hearts. First of all, she is a mother whose daughter is ill. Now, in our family, our son has had serious illness at various times and places involving serious surgery at various points in his life. And I am mindful as a parent that there come points in time where out of fear for your child, there's nothing you won't do to see if you can't get them help, right? It's a very human emotion, and we get that in this Canaanite woman who should not have approached Jesus. Jesus was a rabbi. He was there with his disciples, his students. She should not have interrupted him. And you can see how scandalized the disciples are, right? It's like, Jesus, she's making a scene. Can you make her go away? And Jesus is rather blunt in his response to her. Now, starting this story, she should not have approached him based on the cultural norms of the time. But not only does she approach him, but after getting rejected, she falls down in front of him and begs. And he rejects her again. And she comes back one more time. Now, the Canaanites were seen as others. We often see other people around us as others, don't we? Unless we're brand new to a community and have just moved, in many cases, after we've been situated somewhere for a few years, we have carefully curated the group of people that we come into contact with such that they reflect our values, such that they reflect who we are. They're people like us. And suddenly then, the number of occasions where we run into people who are others goes down and down and down. Now think about that during this time of COVID. We're all in our own homes, right? We don't bump into anybody, like us or not. This sense of being contained in a small space, this sense of only being with like-minded, like people, we don't have that sense of intermingling. Now the disciples, they're horrified that this woman is making a scene. She's not one of us, Jesus. It's not appropriate that she is addressing you in this way. Send her away. How often do we define ourselves and the people that we socialize with as being, well, we're like this, but how often do we define ourselves by drawing a very hard line that says on the other side of that line, we are not like that, right? Sometimes we do that. Now, maybe we don't bump up against that because we've curated our social circles in a way that we don't bump up against that line too often. But this line of thinking is what has been flowing out from my vacation a little bit. As most all of you know, almost every year, we camp at one of the national parks in the United States, usually in the Mountain West, but not always. This year it was Rocky Mountain National Park. Lots of social distancing, lots of space. But one of the things that I realized that I really treasure about times of being in a national park is bumping into people who are not carefully curated for me. When I'm brushing my teeth in the morning in the restroom there in the campground, maybe the guy next to me is from Texas, or maybe they're from Pennsylvania or Montana or Arizona. Maybe they're in a completely different line of work than I am. Maybe they work with their hands. Maybe they don't work with people so much as things. Or maybe they're in a different professional field or have a different family background. There's always an opportunity to bump into other people, people who maybe even, dare I say, vote differently than I do. These are opportunities to be reminded in my own mind about how we are all human beings, that we are all children of God, and an opportunity to open my heart towards others. But this trip was a little different. We were very careful not to spend any time in the restroom if somebody else was there. We were all wearing masks. The visitor centers were all closed. The ranger programs had all been canceled. We stayed on the trail or in our campsite. There was not a lot of intermingling. A missed opportunity, perhaps. In this time of isolation and quarantine, this human tendency to isolate and spend time only with your own tribe has escalated. It has been focused. We sit in our own homes, carefully finding the news that we like, that matches our worldview, and increasingly drawing darker and darker and darker lines with others on the other side. In the text that we have today, Jesus' words come as shocking. He's extremely aggressive. In fact, maybe even a better word for it is mean. Mean towards this woman. How often have our voices as individuals or as a church or our cold and quiet shoulder been a message of unwelcome, a message of othering? In this time and place, we think of a history in the church where we have not been opened and welcoming a sense of church as a place of prayer for all peoples, as the first reading says. We think throughout our history when our openness has not been what it should towards people of different racial backgrounds, the LGBT community, women, all throughout history, the word that has come from the church has not always been a word of grace. But I don't want to leave the text there, because there is a twist at the end of this story that I think is our kernel of grace to take through this week. There's a twist. Culturally, at the time, Jesus would have been well within his rights to send this woman away. But she changes his mind. The fact that he is open to a different path is a different image of God than we sometimes hear. Often, the image of God is one that is stern, that is unyielding, that is about law and about punishing those who do not obey. And yet Jesus hears her cries and heals her daughter, praising her in front of his disciples. So where do we take all of this in the week ahead? There's two things in my mind. One is an understanding that in the challenges that we face in this life, that we should always be turning towards God, knowing that God's heart will turn towards us. The second thing, who are the people that we run into, that we see in the media, that we bump into at the store, that we relate to at work or in any other circle, that we dismiss, that are invisible to us, that we look down upon, that we dismiss as other? This week, I think Christ is challenging us to open our hearts as well. Amen.